Good morning and welcome. Thank you for coming to my mother's services. On behalf of my family, we are grateful for your presence today. I was going to address you live, however, public speaking is hard on the best of circumstances. In survey research on public speaking, the majority of people indicate that they would rather go to the dentist than give a public speech. So given the emotional nature of this address, I hope that you will forgive me that I recorded it here in the library of my family's home, which is the heart of my mother's business and where we've enjoyed many family occasions, Christmases, weddings, Thanksgivings, and other milestone celebrations. My mother was a lover of history, and as a child she was influenced by the great cultural anthropologists like Margaret Mead. She herself wanted to study anthropology in college, but given her insistence on having her hair and makeup perfect before anybody saw her, her mother informed her that she should get a teaching degree because, as she said, "Rebecca, Margaret Mead, you are not." Nonetheless, she was profoundly influenced by the positivist movement in the social sciences, in anthropology and archaeology specifically. Given her love of those disciplines, I took an interest in those as well. After all, who didn't love the Indiana Jones movies? We know from the anthropological and archaeological record that there was a time before history when man didn't consider himself as distinct and separate from the cosmos. At some point in time, we become aware of our historic character, and at that place, we become associated with a particular epoch. Historic man thinks in linear terms. We measure our lives by events and accomplishments. We are born, grow, develop, mature, and ultimately die. Rebecca Sue Luker Aguirre Mazza was born on October 31st, 1949 in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Crawford Luker and Carlston Cox. She was the second child of the marriage. She attended Albuquerque public schools and graduated from Sandia High School in Albuquerque in 1966. She attended Eastern New Mexico University in Portales and transferred to St. Joseph's on the Rio Grande, which later became the University of Albuquerque, from which she matriculated on the 14th of May, 1972. While at the University of Albuquerque, she met Grant Aguirre I. They married, and the product of that marriage was a son, Grant Aguirre II. Rebecca and Grant divorced in 1974, and while teaching high school in Belen, New Mexico, she was teaching a course in career planning. She contacted the United States Department of Justice's Office of the Federal Bureau of Investigations and asked that they send someone to talk to her class about careers in the FBI. The Bureau sent Special Agent Raul James Mazza Sr. to meet with and talk to her class. The two began dating, they married, and the product of that marriage produced one son, Raul James Mazza Jr. She also inherited 3 children from Jim's prior marriage, Rome Mazza, Troy Mazza, and Allison Mazza, whom she loved as her own. After marrying Jim, Rebecca was able to leave the teaching profession and became an entrepreneur. She obtained a real estate license in New Mexico and ultimately founded the Torero Real Estate Agency in Santa Fe. Her agency became the second largest agency in the city of Santa Fe and the largest female-owned agency in the state of New Mexico at one time. She went on to start a construction and land development company and the Torero Art Gallery in Santa Fe. In 1986, Rebecca moved her sons to Guthrie, Oklahoma, and founded the first bed and breakfast in Oklahoma, the Stone Lion Inn. She began writing and producing murder mystery weekends at the Stone Lion Inn, and her business has been featured on CNN, The Wall Street Journal, The London Daily Times, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and many others. In 1987, Rebecca ran for a seat on the Guthrie City Council and became the first woman to represent Ward 3. During her tenure on the City Council, she lobbied for and gained an extension of the runway at the Guthrie Municipal Airport. That airport has gone on to grow and become the Guthrie-Edmond Regional Airport. Rebecca continued to grow her business and run it from one end to multiple ends until her death on February 1st, 2024. All of the above facts are the way that we measure a human life as historic people. However, those facts alone fail to capture the deep and lasting connections my mother made with thousands of people along the way. It's impossible to fully measure the impact she had on people's lives and on her community. However, I would like to share with you a story from the Bible that we discussed often that I think captures one small part of the essence of a remarkable human. It's a story I'm sure you all are familiar with, and I want to focus on two different interpretations of the story and why my mother and I loved the story so well. Before she left teaching, my mother taught a literature class entitled Comparative Religion at Los Alamos High School, which is where Los Alamos labs are located. In that class, she focused on the similarities and differences among the world's great religious traditions. What we find is that there are far more similarities than differences, but there are subtle differences, and they are important in the interpretation of various books and stories. The differences in interpretations from the three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, in this story are important, and they've had a profound impact on my life and my approach as a professor. I discussed these interpretations with my mother many times, and for many of you, my selection of this story will seem strange, but I think when you look at the contrasting interpretations of the story, it sheds light on why my mother loved the story so much. The story I want to share is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. In this story, God tells Abraham that he has heard that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah have become exceedingly wicked, and that he is planning on destroying them. They had become enormously wealthy, and the people of Sodom had come to think that if people came to Sodom and noticed all of their wealth, that they might become jealous and try to conquer Sodom and take their wealth away. So they decided to pass a law against the welcoming of strangers. Giving aid and comfort to strangers in need was one of the most serious commandments for the ancient Israelites. And so this cancellation of the welcoming of strangers was a serious breach of God's command. As God tells Abraham that he plans to destroy the cities, Abraham becomes distraught since his nephew Lot lives in Sodom. And he begins to negotiate with God and asks, if there are 40 righteous people in the city, will you spare the city? And God agrees. What if there are 30? God says yes. 20, 10, and God relents. And so God sends angels in the form of men, and Abraham takes them to his nephew's home. And Lot welcomes the strangers, and he prepares a feast and entertains them. And after supper that night, the men of the city gather outside Lot's house, demanding that he turn the strangers out. And Lot says, I will send no guests for my home. In the Christian tradition, there are two interpretations from the ancient Hebrew. One of the traditions says that the city demands that Lot turn the strangers out so that we may know them. In the second translation of the Hebrew, the men of the city demand that Lot turn the strangers out so that we may have sex with them. In Christian theology, the focus of the story is on the sin of carnal knowledge. The rabbinic tradition is more nuanced. Rabbinic scholarship has 5 millennia of focus on the story, and the rabbis tell us that it is clear that the real lessons of Sodom and Gomorrah are about a lack of compassion and understanding of the human condition. It's about inhospitality. The story is fundamentally about the canceling of the commandment to give aid and comfort to those in need. According to the rabbis, the lessons of Sodom are not about license or even perversion. They're really about cruelty. Given my mother's love of hospitality, I think you can understand why she loved the interpretation from the rabbinic tradition. My mother loved hosting people at her inn. She liked making them feel welcome and comfortable. And it wasn't just her business. When she purchased the White Peacock, she kept one room for anyone of our friends, family, or even acquaintances that needed a place to stay. She never charged for that room. It was open to anyone who needed a place to retreat for as long as they needed it. In the 1st century of the Common Era, the rabbinic scholar Hillel was approached by a pagan who said he would convert to Judaism if the great man could teach him the whole of the Torah while standing on one foot. Hillel replied, "That which is hateful to yourself, do not unto your fellow man. That is the whole of the Bible. The rest is but commentary. Go and learn." My mother was an example of grace and compassion. She took the lessons of Hillel to heart. And recently I had an opportunity to practice this challenge. In October, after my mother had been diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, she started chemotherapy. The night before her second treatment, I was walking upstairs to go to bed when she stopped me in the hallway and said, "Can you do me a favor?" I was extremely tired. It had been a long day, and I knew that the next day would be challenging. She had not been feeling well all day, and she had asked me for a lot of help. I was at the end of my rope, and I almost snapped and said, "What?" But something inside me said, "Don't do it." So I turned to her and I said, "Sure, Mom." And she said, "Would you take some pictures of me with my hair?" I think she knew at that point that she would never have hair again. I took a number of pictures that evening, and she was very vulnerable. I decided to try and document this journey in pictures as best I could, given my mother's humanity. I think the greatest lesson I've learned from her, and my challenge for you, is to always remember that someone that you meet today may be struggling just to keep it together, and how you treat them may be the difference between whether they keep it together or completely fall apart. Be kind. My mother always tried to be kind. My family and I would like to invite you to a reception in honor of our matriarch at our home, the Stone Lane Inn. We hope that you will join us. Thank you again.